Hello everyone, welcome back to Study Room. In this video, we will be studying about food chain. Food chain is basically a relationship between organisms based on their feeding habits. So we define the relationship in such a way that the organisms are related based on the feeding habits. A series of organisms feeding on one another which take part at various biotic levels form a food chain. So here you can see in this diagram we have different kinds of producers, then we have the consumers, then we have the primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, and the final consumers, and then we have the decomposers. Now we'll be talking about the trophic levels in the food chain. Each step or level of the food chain forms a trophic level. So as you can see here, the producers, which are the main source of food for the food chain, they form the base level, that is the first trophic level. Then we have the primary consumers, which form the second trophic level, and they feed upon the producers. Then we have the secondary consumers which feed upon the primary consumers and they form the third trophic level. And at the uppermost portion we have the tertiary consumers which feed upon secondary consumers and form the fourth trophic level. Now you can see here that in this pyramid, this is a pyramid that is being made, and this is a straight pyramid, right? So in this pyramid, in this triangle, you can see here that these producers are the largest in number, and they are the base. They are the base of the triangle, and they are the largest in number. Then the number decreases in primary consumers, eventually in secondary consumers, and then at last the tertiary consumers are the least in number. So you can see here that the numbers are decreasing. Okay, so this is how we can say that the producers are the largest and the tertiary consumers are the smallest in number. The first trophic level is taken by producers here in this triangle, and the fourth trophic level is taken by tertiary consumers here in this triangle. Now talking about the trophic levels in food chain, the first trophic level is basically occupied by the autotrophs or the producers. They fix up the solar energy and make it available for heterotrophs or the consumers. So basically they are the source of energy for the animals, right? For the consumers. And for example, we have the plants. So the plants have the ability to change, to fix up the solar energy and make it available as food for the heterotrophs or the consumers through a process known as photosynthesis that we have studied, right? The next we have the second trophic level, which is occupied by the herbivores or the primary consumers that feed on the producers or the plants. For example, we have here mice feeds on grains. Okay, so mice here is the primary consumer occupying the second trophic level. The third trophic level that we have is occupied by carnivores or the secondary consumers, and here we have the example of snakes. Snakes eat mice. So snakes are the secondary consumers or carnivores as said here. The next trophic level that we have is the fourth trophic level, which is occupied by the larger carnivores or the tertiary consumers belonging to the fourth trophic level. And the example are hawks, which eat the snakes. Snakes belong to the third trophic level, and hawks are the fourth trophic level, which feed upon the snakes. Now, the energy flow between the trophic level. Let us see and analyze the flow of energy that is there in the trophic level. So, light energy is converted into food by the producers, which is the largest in number, right? And then this energy is further flown to the primary consumers by these it is further flown when the primary consumers feed on these producers. Then we have the secondary consumers which further feed on the primary consumers, and the energy is further transmitted to the secondary consumers. When the tertiary consumers again feed upon the secondary consumers, the energy is again transmitted to the tertiary consumers. Now, in this transmission of energy, there is some amount of heat. There is actually a large amount of heat that is released, and this is lost into the atmosphere in the form of heat. Energy that is lost in the atmosphere in the form of heat, and that is happening in the transmission from one trophic level to another, and it is happening in every other trophic level, the transmission of every other trophic level, right? So this is basically a major thing that we have here, that a large chunk of energy is lost into the environment due to heat. Also, decomposers that feed upon all the forms of producers and consumers, all the forms of trophic levels, they also, while gaining energy, here also energy is lost in the form of heat. Now, the green plants capture about 1% of the energy from sunlight and convert it into food energy, as we saw that the producers convert sunlight into food energy. When green plants are eaten by primary consumers, a great deal of energy is lost as heat to the environment. 10% can be taken as the average value of the amount of organic matter that is present at each step and reaches the next level of consumers. The loss of energy at each step is so great that very little unusable energy remains after 4 trophic levels. So here we will be studying also studying about the 10% law. Okay, so 10% law. What is 10% law? While the transmission of the energy, only 10% is transmitted. Okay, for every 10% is transmitted for every point of transmission here, and the rest 90% is actually given out to the environment in the form of heat. So here you can see when the 10% of this energy is transmitted here. So basically the total energy that is here is only 10% of the energy that was present in the previous level. And then again the 10% that was here, from this only 10% is again transmitted. So this is a very less amount of energy that is again transmitted, and 90% is again lost in the form of heat. And this very small amount of energy, from this very small amount of energy, again only 10% is transmitted to the tertiary consumers, and 90% is again lost in the form of heat. So this is what is known as the 10% law, that at each transmission, at each level, during the transmission of energy, we only transmit 10% of the energy, and 90% of the energy is lost in the form of heat. Only 10% of the energy that is present at the existing trophic level is transmitted to the next trophic level. Now we will be studying about the food web. The series of branching lines or natural interconnection of several food chains where an organism has more than one path to connect with other organisms is called food web. So we studied the food chains, but then many organisms have many different feeding habits, right? And they can feed on multiple animals. So the feeding habits and and as they tend to feed on multiple animals, a food web is created, which is shown here. As you can see here, different organisms can feed on many other different organisms, and hence a food web, an interconnected linkage is formed here based on the feeding habits, right? So there are generally a greater number of individuals at the lower trophic levels of an ecosystem. The greater the number is, each organism is generally eaten by 2 or more other kinds of organisms, which in turn are eaten by several other organisms. So instead of a straight line food chain, the relationship can be shown as a series of branching lines called as the food web, as it is shown here, right? Now, interesting aspect of the food chain, we'll be discussing about the interesting aspect, that is the flow of energy in the food chain is unidirectional, as we saw, and we saw the 10% law as well. The energy available at each trophic level gets diminished progressively due to loss of energy at each level, right? It is due to basically the 10% law. The energy that is captured by the autotroph does not revert back to the solar input, as we can see here, that is absorbed by the autotroph does not revert back, it only goes in a unidirectional manner, okay? And the energy which passes to the herbivores does not come back to the autotrophs. As it moves progressively through the various trophic level, it is no longer available to the previous level, right? So this is how, the flow of energy in the food chain is unidirectional. Now we'll be discussing the impact of chemicals on the food chain. The use of pesticides and other chemicals to protect our crops from diseases and pests is the reason behind the chemicals in the food chain. So we use pesticides, and these chemicals are actually getting into the food chain, and these chemicals are either washed down into the soil or into the water bodies, and from the soil these are absorbed by the plants along with water and minerals, and from the water bodies these are taken up by aquatic plants and animals, and hence these are actually being harmful, and these are being they are being transferred to the upper trophic levels. These chemicals are getting into the system of the food chain, and hence they are harming the organisms which are the part of the food chain. There is a very important phenomenon known as biomagnification, which actually helps in understanding this transfer of chemicals in the food chain. Since chemicals are not degradable, they get accumulated progressively at each trophic level, and this accumulation is basically a very big hazard that is there. As human beings occupy the top level in any food chain, the maximum concentration of these chemicals get accumulated in our bodies, and this phenomena is known as biological magnification. You can see here how the chemicals are getting accumulated. From here, this is very small. When these fishes eat lots and lots of these plants, they get accumulated in large number here. Then the large fish eats lots and lots of these small fishes, and then the chemicals get accumulated in larger number here. And then when we eat lots and lots of these large fishes, then the chemicals get accumulated in our body in the largest number. So this is how the concept of biological magnification is actually very harmful and hazardous to human beings. Now, what are the alternatives to pesticide-based foods? The alternatives are that we need to choose organic or locally grown food over pesticide-based food, and also we need to wash fruits and vegetables thoroughly before consuming them so that the chemicals are washed away. So these are the two methods with which we can avoid, or we can just have an alternative to the pesticide-based food and save us from the harmful chemicals that are present in those foods. Now, we'll be quickly discussing the in-text questions. The first question that we have is, what are the trophic levels? Give an example of a food chain and state the different trophic levels in it. So, we discussed about the trophic levels earlier in this video. Trophic levels are various steps in the food chain at which the transfer of food or the transfer of energy takes place, and these levels are known as trophic levels. The example of a food chain can be grass is eaten by insects, and insects are eaten by frog, and frogs are eaten by birds. Okay, so this is a this is a grassland food chain, and in this the trophic levels are: the grass represents the first trophic level, the insect represents the second trophic level, the frog represents the third trophic level, and the birds represent the fourth trophic level. Right? The next question that we have is, what is the role of decomposers in the ecosystem? Decomposers help in decomposing the dead bodies of the plants and animals, and hence act as cleansing agents for the environment. They also help in putting back the various elements of which dead plants and animals are made back into the soil, air and water for reuse by the producers like crop plants. They help in recycling the nutrients and they decompose dead remains, thereby providing space for new life to settle in the biosphere. So these are the very, very important advantages that the decomposers have, and they of course play a very crucial role in the ecosystem. So that was all about the food chain. We studied about the 10% law, we studied about different food ways, we also studied about different trophic levels and the organisms that are present at different trophic levels, and how this whole mechanism of food chain and food web actually works on the basis of food feeding habits. Also, we learned about very crucial concept of biomagnification. This was all about food chain. Thank you so much.